Hi everyone! This project is about the book by Albert Camus, a philosopher, and it is called or entitled The Plague. Now, having everyone lived through, unfortunately, a plague, uh, we that is why we are going to learn about it, and as we continue to live through the plague, we will learn how history repeats itself over and over and over again. Um, So, to better help you understand why we're doing this and why we're going to learn about the plague, I have this video, and then after this, there will be a shorter video within this uh, slideshow, within this PowerPoint, to explain and summarize the plague for you. And then, of course, we have questions afterward.
All right, so some main ideas or main themes and the main character. So it seems like in the United States we have a main character, so to speak. I mean, obviously there's other characters, but we have Dr. Fauci. In Camus' book in the 40s, there was Dr. Rieu. Now, interestingly enough, Dr. Rieu, his name translates to laughing, and he is also a version of the philosopher Albert Camus in his own novel. Now, laughing. Why did Albert Camus pick the name Rieu? I mean, so does that mean that this character knows something that the rest of us do not know? Also, so he is the doctor who helps the people, of course, in the town of Oran in Algeria. Oran, of course, is a real place, but it's a fictional story about real people. Well, about people who have been known to be existing during that time, but are actual. He doesn't use actual names within the story that I know of, that anyone knows of. Okay, so themes: suffering and death, of course, it's a plague. Heroism and defiance, as in today, you have people who are defiant or not wanting to be the positive uh, role models of society, I guess, or um, I guess we all try to be positive, but we all question each other because, well, we'll talk about why we question each other and why we question the universe in another slide. Okay, so that is also part of human nature, as human nature is part of many themes throughout literature and history, because that's what it is. It's all about. It's about the nature of humans, what we strive and what we think about, what we try to improve throughout history. All right. So after this is the short video that I was talking about, and then we'll go back and talk more.
In January 1941, the 28-year-old French writer Albert Camus began work on a novel about a virus that spreads uncontrollably from animals to humans and ends up destroying half the population of a representative modern town. It was called La Peste, the Plague, eventually published in 1947 and frequently described as the greatest European novel of the second half of the 20th century. The book, written in sparse, haunting prose, takes us through a catastrophic outbreak of a disease in the lightly fictionalized town of Oran on the Algerian coast, as seen through the eyes of the novel's hero, Dr. Rieu, a version of Camus himself. As the novel opens, an air of eerie normality reigns. Oran is an ordinary town, writes Camus, nothing more than a French prefecture on the coast of Algeria. The inhabitants lead busy, money-centered and denatured lives. They barely notice that they are alive. Then, with the pacing of a thriller, the horror begins. Dr. Rieux comes across a dead rat, then another and another. Soon the town is overrun with the mysterious deaths of thousands of rats who stumble out of their hiding places in a daze, let out a drop of blood from their noses and expire.
Lovely.
The inhabitants accuse the authorities of not acting fast enough, so the rats are removed and the town heaves a sigh of relief. But Dr. Rieux suspects that this is not the end. He has read enough about the history of plagues and transmissions from animals to humans to know that something is afoot. Soon an epidemic seizes Oran, the disease transmitting itself from citizen to citizen, spreading panic and horror in every street. In order to write the book, Camus immersed himself in the history of plagues. He read books on the Black Death that killed 50 million people in Europe in the 14th century, the Italian plague of 1629 that killed 280,000 people across northern Italy, the Great Plague of London of 1665, as well as plagues that ravaged cities on China's eastern seaboard during the 18th and 19th centuries. In March 1942, Camus told the writer André Malraux that he wanted to understand what plague meant for humanity. Said like that, it might sound strange, he added, but this subject seems so natural to me. Camus was not writing about one plague in particular, nor was this narrowly, as has sometimes been suggested, a metaphoric tale about the recent Nazi occupation of France. Camus was drawn to his theme because, in his philosophy, we are all, unbeknownst to us, already living through a plague. That is, a widespread, silent, invisible disease that may kill any of us at any time and destroy the lives we assumed were solid. The actual historical incidents we call plagues are merely concentrations of a universal precondition. They are dramatic instances of a perpetual rule, that we are vulnerable to being randomly exterminated by a bacillus, an accident, or the actions of our fellow humans. Our exposure to plague is at the heart of Camus' view that our lives are fundamentally on the edge of what he termed the absurd. Proper recognition of this absurdity should not lead us to despair, pure and simple. It should, rightly understood, be the start of a redemptive, tragicomic perspective. Like the people of Oran before the plague, we assume that we've been granted immortality, and with this naivety come behaviors that Camus abhorred: a hardness of heart, an obsession with status, a refusal of joy and gratitude, a tendency to moralize and judge. The people of Oran associate plague with something backward that belongs to another age. They are, in their eyes, modern people with phones, trams, aeroplanes and newspapers. They are surely not going to die like the wretches of 17th century London or 18th century Canton. It's impossible it should be the plague. Everyone knows that has vanished from the West, says one character. Yes, everyone knew that, Camus adds sardonically, except the dead. For Camus, when it comes to dying, there is no progress in history, there is no escape from our frailty. Being alive always was and will always remain an emergency, as one might put it, truly an inescapable underlying condition. Plague or no plague, there is always, as it were, the plague, if what we mean by this is a susceptibility to sudden death, an event that can render our lives instantaneously meaningless. And yet, in the novel, still the citizens deny their fate. Even when a quarter of the city is dying, they keep imagining reasons why the problem won't happen to them. The book isn't attempting to panic us, because panic suggests a response to a dangerous but short-term condition from which we can eventually find safety. But there can never be safety, and that is why for Camus we need to love our fellow damned humans and work without hope or despair for the amelioration of suffering. Life.
The remediation of suffering. So, in review, we have the town of Oran, which is overrun by rats, and you have the rats that bleed out of their nose, and then people die, and then people get rid of the rats, and then everyone's happy, but then Rieux knows that something is not right here, and Albert Camus goes on to explain that we are vulnerable to bring randomly, or we are vulnerable to being randomly exterminated, meaning we kind of turn on each other. and we need to realize that things happen for a reason, or do they? Which we will discuss at a later point. Okay, thank you. So, what is meant by absurd? Well, did we bring this or any plague upon ourselves as humans? There is a desire for order in the world, but the universe is indifferent to this human need. There's more chaos in the world than we think, and the argument is that it is indeed absurd to continue the tensions between us and the universe, as history will inevitably repeat itself. So in closing, when we answer some of the questions and we read some sections of the plague, we should keep in mind, is illness a punishment? Now, I know that might sound obvious, but there is a greater point here, I think, that Camus is trying to make, and we can talk it out through answers that you will write in your response to the questions and through other discussions that we may have. Good luck.